One, I'm delighted to welcome on stage Odile Renaud-Basso, President of the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, the EBRD. We're going to discuss the role and priorities of the EBRD. I will give an intro, if you'd like to come on stage. We'll move to the couches. Ms. Renaud-Basso was elected the 7th president of the EBRD in November 2020. She's the first ever female head of a multilateral development bank. Before joining EBRD, Ms. Renaud-Basso oversaw the development of France's economic policy, leading on European and international financial affairs, trade policies, financial regulation, and debt management. I've also been asked to point out that for this session, we have two firsts here on the stage: first female chair of ICMA and the first female president of an MDB. So, so thank you. So speaking for myself, it's an honor and a pleasure to be here with you today. Thank you very much. And so I'm happy to lead into our first topic, which is crises in human capital. So we're changing slightly topics from the panel we just had into perhaps more sort of a bit more of human aspect to what's been going on. Crises in human capital caused by human-made conflict, such as the war in Ukraine, and also natural disasters, which we've seen, unfortunately, plenty of over the last 12 months. We live in a world which is increasingly fragmented by major fault lines, such as these. Two of the largest countries of operation in the EBRD, Ukraine and Turkey, are living through these crises and the aftermath. What do you consider to be the role of the international community and the EBRD, not only in addressing displacement of human capital, but in reconstruction in the immediate and longer term?
Thank you for this question, and I believe the international community has a very important role to play. It's very different, I think, the situation, of course, Ukraine and Turkey. In the case of Ukraine, I think the support of the international community, or a large part of the international community, is absolutely fundamental in the outcome of the war and in the capacity of the country up to now to stay and to resist and to fight for its freedom and preserving its frontier and its autonomy as a country and independent country. So I think that the role of the international community has been very important. It continues to be fundamental, and of course there is a lot of military support, involvement, in training, providing military support, but also economic and financial support. And it's the level of support which has been provided to Ukraine is phenomenal, starting from money from the government and the IMF now to keep the government going. 50% of the deficit of the country, of the budget deficit of the country, which has been increasing dramatically because of the military situation and the collapse, the very, very strong recession, minus 30% of GDP last year. And so there has been huge financial support in order to keep the government continuing to function, pay the civil servants, pay the pension, and help the country managing the key function. Institutions like us, EBRD, we've been focusing more on the real economy side, which is also amazing in a sense, and because everything, the country is in war, so you have, and the war is in part of the eastern and southern part, but you also have risk of bombs everywhere in the country. It happened quite often, but the things are continue to function. The banking system is functioning, the private sector companies are doing their business, people are working, and so forth. So there is, and to do that, it's very important, for example, and this is where we have been focusing a lot, to keep the key infrastructure functioning, electricity coming in, heating being possible, railway functioning, and so forth. And that's where what we've been doing last year, providing a lot of financing to do that. And in a way, this is a second, for the countries, this is also fundamental to continue and to be able to win this war. So I think the role of the international community, and beyond institution also, it's a lot of bilateral support from G7 countries, the European countries, and so forth, coming together and providing this exceptional level of support. For Turkey, it's a bit different because of course, the impact of the earthquake is dramatic, and the number of victims and the impact on the region is awful. There has been also a lot of support, but of course it's more targeted. We are ourselves providing some targeted support, 1.5 billion, in order to help businesses, the banking system, and so forth, to finance the most urgent needs locally. But the country will rebound. And it's a sort of more targeted event.
Yes, I think it's so interesting what you're saying as well, especially in the Ukraine context. There's so much focus on military aid and what that means, and sort of that level of solidarity, as opposed to what really, one of the things that is just as critical is keeping the country up and running, which is what you're talking about. So, I think that's, it's really important to highlight. Situations like the war in Ukraine have had other implications, other impacts beyond in the country, including negative impacts on energy security all over the world. Does this ultimately exacerbate the rate of climate change, for example, through knock-on effects like continued reliance on coal or other fossil fuels, and slow down progress in the green transition? And I think the question really is, what has the EBRD's immediate response been to energy security? And looking forward, what priority does the EBRD place on the shift required to ensure a more sustainable and decarbonized future?
So indeed, the war in Ukraine has triggered immediately, clearly, an energy security crisis, with some countries really, a huge shock on energy supply because of the role of Russian gas in Europe and in a number of European countries as a key source of energy. So what we've done at our level is first to provide some emergency support to countries which are facing really a shock in supply, starting with Ukraine, because Ukraine was, in the risk of not having sufficient gas. So we really provided them some credit lines in order to be able to buy gas. So it's not, for a development bank, it's quite unusual, but it's something which has proven, extremely important for them to store gas and to be able to go through the winter with sufficient capacity. And we've done the same with Moldova. Moldova is extremely, a small country, very much fragilized by the conflict in Ukraine. They are very close to Ukraine, and they were also extremely dependent on Russian gas and in a risk of not having supply at all. So we helped them to buy gas, to store it, and continue to do that. Indeed, what happened in the very short term had some impact on, and we've seen that in Germany, in other countries, prolonging coal-fired power plants or reopening even some coal facilities. So in the short term, this is indeed an element that does not fit well with the objective of decarbonization of the economy and the green transition, because coal is, of course, the worst response. But what we see also, and I think that we've been saying that in the beginning, is that in the context where energy security comes as a new, in some way, we had a bit forgotten that energy security and supply was so strategically key in terms of independence and so forth. So energy security coming at the forefront, it's also clear that renewable is also a way to develop energy security, because it's on your ground. It does not answer all the question, but it's a very powerful mean to enhance energy security. It's on your ground. You have control of it. You are not so the dependency may be more limited and so forth. So what we see in the context of the energy tension we've been through is a real take-up and increase of renewable, and it was quite striking to see that there were more investment in renewable energies than in fossil fuel last year, and this is the first time ever. This is combined with the fact that the progress made in terms of technology, prices, and so forth are really make renewable a very efficient solution now in a number of countries is much, much, much cheaper than any fossil fuel. So it's still it's intermittent. You have issues of storage. You need the base load and so forth. But I mean, we see that as a very effective answer, and we really see a shift in a number of countries, including emerging countries we are working in that direction. For example, I mean, two examples. Poland used to be a country still very dependent on coal. 70% of the energy in Poland comes from coal, but they were not very convinced about the need to move to, I mean, and the acceleration on the green transition, and the really endorsement of this agenda is much stronger than it used to be. And we were last week in Uzbekistan, where we had our annual meeting. So Uzbekistan is also very dependent on fossil fuel, but now they are developing renewable capacities at a very high speed, in wind, in solar, and so forth, and trying also that. And for some countries, it's becoming a new source of development. We are working in Egypt, for example. Egypt used to use quite a lot of gas, and with our support and support of international communities, they decided really to decommission gas power plant, to be able to sell it. That will help them with access to foreign currency, will give them some export revenues, and they have huge capabilities, huge desert to develop renewable, for example, or wind, good places also, and they will develop huge amount of, I mean, 10 gigawatt of renewable in the next years. And this is also an opportunity to bring private sector developers, investors in these countries. So it's a very strategic direction, I think, for us as EBRD, but more broadly in the development sector. We ourselves finance 50% of our investment in the green sector, have a positive green impact, and we have, since the beginning of the year, all our investment must be Paris aligned. So which is a big, I mean, it's a big endeavor. It's not easy. It's tough. I mean, a lot of methodological issues and so forth, but it's a very important objective for us also.
Yeah, I was going to say that's a big, I mean, especially in the space you operate in, that's a big commitment. So that's terrific. It's wonderful to hear that those stories of move towards more renewable energy sources, you know, even in this context. So moving sort of to our last topic here, strong financial cooperation can only happen in the context of resilient and robust global financial systems. I think people would generally agree with that. As a global effort, what is EBRD's role in encouraging the development of functioning capital markets in its member countries?
So this is a key priority for us, because we believe that functioning and strong financial markets are key for development of the real economy, businesses, companies, and so forth. So one of our, I mean, this is one of, we have departments devoting entirely on this support for, I mean, strong financial system in the different countries. What we do is, I mean, we work on different levels. The first one would be the legal, regulatory environment in order to ensure that financial market regulation, banking regulation, and is the right one, have the appropriate incentive, you have strong regulators, credible entities, and so forth. So that's the first layer. And we do a lot of policy work in this respect in order to, because in EU it's quite simple. We still work in some EU countries, but then it's quite simple. They have all the EU framework, but in a number of countries they really define their own regulation, and so we really can help with the best practices and helping them to technical assistance to have the right framework. The second element is to help them design new products and be at the forefront, or adapt to the evolution of the financial system globally. So, for example, we work with a lot of countries to develop covered bond. system, and including in, for example, the Baltic countries, to have a sort of pan-Baltic covered bond framework, so that they have also the critical size. Because for a number of countries in which we work, these are small countries with challenges in terms of liquidity, of size, of being able to attract sufficient private investors also from abroad. So the size matters in a number of cases. And the last thing we are doing is also to invest, to play a role as an anchor investor and help launching new products in the markets, creating liquidity and so forth. So we do that, for example, when for companies issuing, we can develop projects with companies that want to invest, develop a project we support, and rather than doing direct lending, we would help them to issue bonds, and we will contribute to buy the bonds. So not all but as an anchor investor, 20-30%. And we are also, so we are doing for companies, but also for project financing, and a lot of green bonds. One of our strong focus is also to facilitate the emergence of a green bond market in the different countries. So convincing our clients to go in that direction in order to get a larger investor base and so forth. So this is, we use in a way all the means we have and trying to help the countries to address the specific challenges they have. One, for example, of our priority is also developing a local currency capabilities, because for these countries, being able to borrow in local currency is a strength, is a factor of stability, and helping to develop this kind of local currency market is also part of our mandate, our role.
Great, terrific. Well, listen, I think that's been incredibly informative for the group, and I think the work that you're doing is obviously incredibly important and critical. So that concludes our session. Wanted to thank you very much for coming here today and for chatting with me. So thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed.